For George, as the first speaker of the proposition side, our team firmly believes that we should oppose school students protesting by refusing to attend schools. So in my speech, I will first give some characterization and then give some arguments supporting our side. Then I will give some rebuttals to points that our opponents might say. So firstly, characterization. Our, our team defines students as students under 18 and does not have a mature mind and critical thinking. This means that all of them are not grown up. And secondly, we want to emphasize that we are not opposing the act of protest. We're only opposing the act of not going to school to act as a way of protesting. Okay, moving on to my argument. My first argument is that students should not protest by not attending school because education is essential for their future success. The thing that is most important for students under 18 is education. But as a continuation form, meaning that you should go to school every day. Every day the schools tells you to, except for some reasonable reasons. Our team strongly believes in the power of education and its ability to empower individuals and bring about positive change. While protests can be an effective way to raise awareness and advocate for social issues, it is important to strike a balance between activism and personal growth through education. The best way to solve this problem is to let students use ways other than not going to school, such as organizing peace marches or engaging in respectful dialogue with school administrators and policymakers. This way can make sure that students get the awareness of teachers, which is their goal, but also still get the education that they need right now. Protesting by not going to school can also have a huge impact on both the students and the people around them. Firstly, since the students are not going to school, it's against the school's rules, which means that schools are like almost every school is forbidden of that act. Then who will take the responsibility of students not going to school? George, you might think that it is the students, but as we all know, students are trying to protest. So that is a reason that they can say to the schools like the principal, and then the principal will think about it. Then if the student doesn't take the responsibility, and the responsibility of that is usually getting kicked out or getting fired, then who will take the responsibility? Is the school just going to let them go out and go in as a school in every time and in every moment? Definitely not, right? So this is a very strong impact that shows that students should not protest by refusing to attend school. Secondly, if students are not going to school, then who will take care of them and who will help keep them safe? As I have mentioned in our team's characterization, when we say students, it is students under 18 years old, and they do not have a mature mind and critical thinking skills. This means that that even though there are some kids who are in high school or in middle school that can actually take care of themselves, but they are still not grown ups. They are not mature. They do not know how to really take care of them, since usually at home, parents might let them stay at home for a moment, but they won't let them stay at home alone for a month, a week, or even just multiple days. This means that students do not know how to take care of themselves, and they need somebody to help them. Otherwise, they'll suffer in that condition. Furthermore, not going to school will have a huge negative impact on their education. As I have just stated in the start of my argument, that education is the most important thing for students at that age, because they need education to become grown up. Otherwise, even if they did become grown up, then they will still need go to building stuff, and then they'll carry these high materials, which is something that we do not want. We want them to live in a peaceful life, but not doing all of those stuff, even though these stuff are also essential to people's nice life. And also without education, also missing school will let them miss a lot of key materials that the teachers are talking in class, which can be a very key material, both for their tests and for their homework, but also actually for their later on life, like in jobs or in the real society, like in the real quote unquote real world. And also it will let them it will affect them of going to a good university or college, which can also affect them a lot on their later on life. In addition to that, if one group of students didn't attend school to protest against one claim today, while another group not attending tomorrow to promote the opposite claim, then judge then are there still any benefit of the school really opening? Because since there are, like, for example, this group of people, 100 people, they did not go to school this day. Another 100 people did not go to school that day. Then are there any? Then why should there really be a school? School isn't a place that lets students go out and go in whenever they want. Schools have policies. School has laws such as what government do. School has laws such as what countries do. And then if we broke these laws, then what is why do they need laws? What is the function of schools? The function of school is to teach students, and just what I've explained in my whole argument, that students not go students protesting by refusing to attend schools will miss these educations. So will miss these educations. So judge, if you want students to have a good education, and students should not have some safety problems, and if we want students to have a great and peaceful after on later on life.
It is unfair for proposition to support the world where students do not have any anger against the school. Will students have literally no concerns about the school? No. This debate can only function when both sides assume that the students have growing incentive to go against the schools. Given the fact that in either world you are against the school, I'm generally unsure if you would even probably be listening to what your teacher is saying if you just make students to shut up and sit in front of the desk in proposition world. My illustrations will go simple. First on funerals on setup, and secondly, two constructives. First about the setup. Two parts. First, how do you characterize students protesting by refusing to attend school? Students would choose not to go to school the moment they recognize a problem that is rising within the school, and the school strike often happen at communal level, meaning that students gather in a group and do not go to school. Although we agree that parents do have large scales of interferences in children and students, most of the protests that show in the form of refusing to go to school are likely to be by the students' own choice because of two reasons. First, parents generally want students to attend the school at the first place, therefore strikes would only happen when the parents agree with a problem or secondly cannot resist to the student. But second part, what is the proper counterfactual that proposition should properly defend? Note that in both worlds there will be existing levels of anger. I'm going to extend it in my constructives. While proposition asserts that anger that students would be expressed in a peaceful way, we say that it is not. Therefore, the proper counterfactual that they should defend is a world where students express their anger towards the school to violence and physical outbreak, as refrain that students have a tendency to be very impulsive and emotionally underdeveloped. Therefore, the comparative of this debate should be school strike versus violence. I'm going to devote an entire chunk of analysis to prove why this is true and why this is likely to happen. Now, first argument, why should students be able to express their ideas however they want through strikes? I'm going to integrate all my rebuttals against Prime Minister into my arguments because I think that principle and comparative that we provide already responds to the entire case of proposition. The premise of the argument is simple. It is justified for students to express their opinions against schools through strikes. Two layers of analysis that prove why this is true. Firstly, it is extremely unlikely that the issue that students are protesting are about would be totally irrelevant to the school. We think that protest does not happen randomly. If you look at protests that happen in various forms all around the world, they are targeted towards a specific issue and specific target. Whenever it is a worker strike, target a company, a citizen strike, target a government, note that the protest does not happen randomly without any causes or relevant with the issue that is happening within the community. And it is extremely likely that students will be motivated in a similar way towards the school. This is because the change that they will be demanded isn't likely to be something that will be random, because we think that students already recognize how school is supposed to be important because they're taught from various sources like teachers and parents about it. So if they're willing to abandon their education and speak their voice up about something, we would think highly likely for it to be something extremely significant and relevant. But secondly, why is refusing to attend school a legitimate form of protest? We think that the protest fails to become effective when it happens in the form of harming other people. But the thing is, children quitting school isn't any of that. In fact, it's a form of peaceful protest that does not harm any people or stop few students missing out of the school. It does not harm other students nor the teacher, and while it does get message across, there aren't any additional consequences. The conclusion of the entire argument is simple. We think that this argument proves our winning principle, why peaceful protest in the form of not going to school is absolutely justified and in fact a legitimate form form of protest. Now, second argument. Why are the protests and forms of school strikes very effective forms of bringing change? The premise of the argument is simple. As opposed to other alternatives that this group of students may go on and likely to go on in their world, school strikes are far more effective and peaceful, non-invasive way. I'm going to prove this argument in two ways. Firstly, given the fact that there still are alternative forms of protest against schools existing in our world, school strike would happen when there's an extreme form of problem that common students can explicitly feel happening in the school. This means two things. One, we characterize students be generally less sensitive to the issues that rise in the school because one, there's external interferences like teachers, parents, etc., that have active incentive to mute the rebel, and secondly, they are not familiar with problems enough, meaning that they're not enough capable of examining the existing problems that happen in an untangible way where they cannot easily examine and recognize in the school. Therefore, given the fact that there's an outcompeting incentive to go against the school, we say that the alternative way of proposition is turning into violence and physical outbreak that is far worse of the school, which happens in a far worse way and far more violent and unwilling way that we do not want in this debate. As compared to violence, refusal to go to school and simple school strike is much more effective way that is less invasive and yet attacking and sending the clear message to bring out changes. But second analysis. There aren't a lot of places where schools can express their own dissatisfaction. Meaning to say, and meaning that there not a lot of alternative choices that students can move away from other than violence or physical outbreaks. Schools would have incentive to care for the refusal to go to school when it comes to school strike and groups of students rather refuse to go to school, since this impacts the school's reputation and faculty structure. We buy the entire mechanism of a proposition that the school would care and school reputation will be harmed by the entire school strike. The issue within the community and the awareness of the problem itself is so much of harm to the school. I mean that this is good because it's effective and change and bring a change because students, the exact reason why the protest happened at the first place is because there's a demand for the change and systematic changes within the schools that cannot happen without the protest. Refusal solely achieve this by not being invasive. I'm going to launch a comparative here that weighs upon every single material from proposition. Firstly, in either world, students will still have loads of incentive to go against the school. There's an existing growing anti-school incentive and anger against the school anyway. Given the fact that proposition world, the anger would not be expressed through refusal and school strike, there are two scenarios that I want to weigh over and prove why it's unlikely and why it's the far worse in their world. First scenario, when students do not express the anger but sink it in and tolerate it in their own minds. This is bad, since if you have enough level of anti-school sentiment, it is very unlikely that the proper learning will be even existing in their world. This also weighs against it because when they say that education will not be properly learned, etc., this literally proves why it's untrue. Because you would not even want to listen to what your teacher is saying, nor have incentive to participate in class discussion at best. But secondly, when the protest turns out to be really violent protests are likely to happen in their role. Since first, I already proved that the entire assumption in this debate is that students already have considerable level of anger in either world, and secondly, students are not enough mature, and we characterize them to be impulsive and emotionally underdeveloped, short thought span, and as opposed to adults, where they cannot enough comprehend long-term scenarios when it comes to violent protesting and violence that happens in school. This is worse; it directly harms the learning of other students, which is more harmful to the school education. Violent outbreaks or strike. This is the proper comparative that we push at the start of the LO speech.
So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1, go. So our opponents seem to not understand the issue at core. So they say that on both sides, these students have an incentive to go against the school and they are angry with the school. But here we're not talking about protesting against issues that are happening inside the school. We're talking like violence and bullying. We're talking about societal issues, like for example, climate change, and there's no anger there. And also our opponents have been talking about how then this will give these students a freedom of choice, and then they can choose if they want to go out and they can have this choice. They have not considered that leaving school to go and protest. Who has approved this? Did the school approve this? Did their parents approve this? No one approved them to go outside and protest. This is against the law, and do our opponents not care about that there's law forbidding them from going outside, and also that this puts their safety at risk? So our opponents seem not to consider this at all. So in my speech, I would first like to compare our both worlds, and then I would like to move on to a few more arguments adding on to our first speaker speech. So first of all, a comparative. So first of all, why is this topic only about primary and secondary students like below the age of 18? This is because they are different from college students and adults. Because, for example, if these secondary and primary students, they do not have the right to vote, while these adults do. And they also, if they make a criminal charge, then they will not be punished. They'll only go to some youth camp, while adults go to prison. And also, this responsibility of these students, it is still in the hands of the school and the parents, and they also don't have things like a driver's license. So we first have to compare. There's a difference between college and adults, between these primary and secondary students. These college and adults, they can have their own responsibility. This is why they are characterized in our world differently. Now, moving on to some arguments on why primary and secondary school students are different again. So first of all, they are definitely premature and they have not developed critical thinking skills physically and mentally. I think this is something that both sides can agree on. This is a key thing that both sides can agree on. And so what is the result of this? Well, this leads to our first argument. First of all, this can lead to these students being manipulated and used because they have not have this critical thinking. So when they go outside to protest, this might not actually be their own voice. They can easily be swayed by just something their friends say or some false information they read on social media. This can easily sway their idea, and we don't even want to think about what if some adult tells them they are wrong, and they can easily be swayed and manipulated to do things that are not actually what they want to do, since they have not developed this idea of critical thinking. And also, I want to ask our opponents, as they have talked about how freedom of choice is something, and that these students are angry, so they should be able to choose if they want to go against the school and protest. But this going out of school without any permission from their parents or the school, this is against the law. So I want to ask our opponents, who will take responsibility if someone gets injured? Let's just say this student, they go outside to protest and then they get injured somehow. Who will take this responsibility? The school did not approve them to go out. So will they be able, they won't be able to take responsibility. The parents don't even know about them leaving school. They won't be able to take responsibility. So then how will this actually work? And also, if a student goes out for a field trip, even in high school, they still need approval from the school and the parents for their safety. So if you have to have approval to go on a field trip, which is monitored by the school, how can we let these students just go outside of school to go protest without any approval from any adults and any parents? So who will actually take this responsibility? This is something I want to ask our opponents. Are there any POIs? I would accept a POI right here. 3, 2, 1. Seeing that there are no POIs, I will continue on with my speech. So safety is something that every person, every school has in mind at first. So of course, if these students leave the school, then this will obviously be something that is no one will take responsibility of. And even if our opponents think about freedom, we agree that freedom is something that is quite important, and that these students should learn freedom. But freedom still has its parameters. It still has a frame of what some things that cannot go out, or these students cannot go out of bounds of, and they can learn through safer ways. Protesting is something against the law, and this is not something that these students should be using to learn freedom. So students, if they have some concern about societal issues, well, they can ask their parents, they can ask their school, they can ask their community, they can ask their teachers to voice out this concern towards the society if they have any issues, instead of protesting. So their voice is still heard. This is something that we still remain on our side. And also, students can learn freedom of speech inside the school. They can learn different types of ways to express themselves inside of school instead of breaking law and going outside. So now a comparison between, comparing our world versus our opponent's world. So our opponents, in our world, we do not have any of the risk of the school getting in trouble from letting these students go outside, which they of course did not approve. And also we have a responsibility, because and our opponent's world does not have this responsibility. They do not clarify who will take the responsibility if anyone gets hurt. And also we still have this chance. So if we learn freedom of speech in safer ways, once they grow up and have responsibility of themselves, they can still go outside and protest. So once they are adults, they can still have this voice. But right now, as students, they should not be able to. And also in their world, they have a high risk of these students breaking the law, and then they have no one to take responsibility of them. So going back to at the beginning of my speech, I've already said that these students, they are not able to vote. They cannot get a driver's license. If they break the law, they do not go to prison. So then this is because they are not mature enough. And this is the reason why also they do not have responsibility over themselves. Adults do have responsibility over themselves. So this is a key difference we want to say. So I want to end on a note to ask our opponents. If our opponents say that they allow students to go outside to protest by leaving school and going outside to be protesting, why should these students, that means they have the responsibility. So why should these students not be able to vote? Why should they not be able to get a driver's license? Why should they not be able to go to an adult prison? So for all the reasons above, please give the ballot to the proposition.
If I identify as a gender neutral person who goes to a school that doesn't have a gender neutral bathroom and I feel extremely uncomfortable, the most feasible and the most effective way that I can do in my power where I cannot vote is to opt out of school. I think the proposition does not know what fiat means. When we closely look at what this debate is purposed to be, we can easily know that this debate questions about the method of addressing existing issues and angers in the society. Proposition rejects this fiat and assumes to the second speaker that students will be in the world of daisies and ponies. This debate can only function given the guideline that they want to go against the school. Any tension is between whether or not they should express about our extension from LO. Let me move on to a clarification. First, proposition keeps I'll take up your now actually.
All right. So given that in a lot of nations' constitutions that learning for teenagers is not only a right and also an obligation, how can you justify that not going to school is not a
Yes, but it's an obligation, but not going to school doesn't mean that you pay a fine. Not going to school doesn't mean that you go to jail. What we're trying to say is that it's not an illegal, we don't get the whole push from government why they want to frame opting out of school as something people will be so mad about to the point where the students are bashed upon. We don't think this is the right characterization that they should go for. We think that in fact this is a totally peaceful way of protesting, because while it does spread the message and it is visible to the administrator's eyes, it strikes a correct balance between voicing out their issue and simply maintaining a peaceful stance. And this is why we would like to keep that clarification in. Let me move on to my rebuttals again. They also say that they want to strike a balance between personal growth through education and activism through respectful dialogues with administrators and organizing peace marches. The reason why school quit protests are different from these marches or administrators is simply because A, it promotes urgency, and B, it's more feasible. On the point of urgency, we think that there's just a narrative against students that they aren't able to cognitively analyze what is a problem. People don't take teenagers seriously, and we think that even if they were to actually organize a meeting or actually perform a march, there would be no incentive for governments or principals to be willing to change anything, because there really isn't a third active pressure that works upon them. And we also think that just because a few children are unhappy wouldn't really change a politician's voting result or smear on the school's reputation, especially when the event takes place outside of the learning environment, defeating the entire purpose. The difference here is that the immediacy of a no-school protest conveys a sense of urgency regarding the issues being protested, right? Organizing a march or organizing an appeal letter takes much more time, and that does not address swift action to address concerns, right? On a much more important note, on the second point of feasibility, this is so important. Using propositions of logic that students won't be able to take care of themselves, how are they so sure that they will be able to organize a meeting with the school administrator or organize an entire event? But the core of this rebuttal is that school strikes are much easier to opt in. Why? Firstly, no school strikes are much more visible. You can tangibly see that students are listening. You cannot do that towards students when you send a single mail or you protest outside of the school environment. Two, it's more accessible. Simply choosing not to go to a school is a much easier way to achieve activism and opt-in than choosing to go through tedious steps to write an appeal letter or organizing a mass march protest, right? The difference here is that more people won't be willing to join if you were going to a march. More people won't be willing to join if you want to write an appeal letter. But the thing is that because no school strikes are so easier to opt in and it's so much accessible, this is why this is why choosing to not go to school is much more effective way to bring change to the school environment. And this is why we're so willing to promote no school strikes as an alternative.
POI.
Rejected. Panels, note that I completely demolished your counterfactual with this rebuttal on why no school strikes are so much feasible. It promotes a sense of urgency, so much accessible and visible, right? Let me move on to our last argument, which is why are protests so much worse in proposition's world? The premise here is the way of how students express their opinions and concerns would be distorted to a worse alternative in proposition's world. I would like to divide this up into two scenarios that would happen in proposition's world. One, where protests would turn violent, and second, where protests don't happen and students are rather suppressed. Why is violence likely? In either world, you have anger and the concerns that children want to clearly express their opinions about. Take note that these children, which proposition agrees, are significantly emotionally underdeveloped, right? This looks like damaging the school property, harming their peers and faculty members when they want to choose an alternative method to school strikes. I wouldn't significantly build up to this point because Ella already elaborated. So why is this so much worse in their world, right? When violence happens, it harms other kids' rights to education as well. Because students make their angry or the students reject out of order, students won't be able to focus on their education. Second, violence is a worse alternative because people are much more likely to get irrational. And people are more likely to opt into other irrational methods as well. And we also think that silent suffrage is also equally bad as well, because if issues don't get publicized, the awareness decreases, and also learning doesn't happen because something at school is extremely bothering these students, yet they can't do anything about it, right? And we think that these both versions are extremely likely characterizations of propositions world, as we already elaborated the entirety in Ella's speech. And due to these reasons, we're so proud to oppose.
First, I will give a rebuttal on the deputy leader of opposition, and then I will have a clash analysis and then weighing of all the consequences. All right, first on the rebuttals, I will first major in on the school life. So I have to claim back to the motion of our debate that in the information page that was given to us, it is said not to attend school to protest issues in society, which we can say that all of those that the students protest by refusing to attending school, it is for the crisis or the things that they were angry with in the society, not in the school. So it has nothing bothering with school life itself. So in this case, our opponents, a lot of arguments has failed to actually respond to the motion itself about the crisis and things that bother them in the society. So that in that case, so a lot of arguments didn't respond. And second, it is about effectiveness. Well, indeed, it is definitely effective for students to not going to school. However, is it actually good for them? Well, I believe that we have a lot of arguments that is talking about this topic. That so I'll claim that again. So, judge, a student don't go to school for a protest, and while the school doesn't know that student is absent, no matter where he or she goes on the streets or go back home not attending the school on the strike, it is what they're harming is not the society. They're harming themselves. They're actually not learning, and what they're losing is not for the whole good of the society. What they're losing is their opportunity for learning, and that seems very important for students because they're students. They need to learn because they have their future. They need to grow up and they have their jobs. But if they go on strike and stay at home, they're losing their opportunity to learn, and that is important decline. All right, now I'm going to face on the clash areas. Well, first I have to claim now, judge, one of the most important areas that we believe it is a clash. It is about whether that students go on protest like not attending school a good idea. because as our Deputy Prime Minister had told before, that the students might be used by bad people, and because they're not actually mature, and they're sometimes like controlled by their emotions, they might not make the best and the most rational opinion for them. So in this case, it might be used by all of those people who have their own opinions, might like people who were not satisfied. They will use the students to go on protest, which will harm the students then instead of the people who are behind them. And so in this case, our opponents failed to respond in this clash area. So I believe we win this clash point. So all right, I'll stop now. If there is any POI, I'll count down for 3, 2, 1. Since there's no POI, all right, accept.
Can you give an example how a student missing one day of school would affect their education significantly?
And can you repeat that?
Can you give an example of why a student missing a single day of school might affect their education significantly?
All right, so in some cases, a day of school might not seem to be a very big thing. However, for a whole school, a lot of students are going out for one day, or those process lasted for a long time. It might cause it will cause a great damage for those students, and including the school, as the school is responsible for the students. It cannot create it doesn't give the students a very good chance for them to acquire education. And also those students actually get out of school. For example, when it is a test day, or it is a day for their final exams, they didn't go to school, and they will lose their like their great performances. It is very important for their for students, isn't it? All right, back to the clash area. All right, the next thing I would like to say is about the action that going not attending the school. And now I'm going to state back to the clarification. In our side, we believe that not attending the school, it is a grand concept. That it may include like just going back home and stay at home without going to school. And it can also mean that they didn't attend the school and they go on the streets for protest. So in this case, our opponents have rebutted that some of those that the students won't go on the streets doesn't exist, which may cause them danger and also issues for them when they go out to school. It might turn into violent also. So in this case, it is extremely dangerous for students to go on the streets when they're having a protest for not attending school, because school itself is safe, because the school needs to be responsible for the children, as our Deputy Prime Minister have told before. So it is safe. However, when they go on to school, they will go on to protest outside the school without attending it. They may be dangerous for them. So in this case, for the safety and the morality thing, we win this clash area. For the next thing, it is about education. Well, as our opponents had told before, that educating one day might not. It is education itself is important, that both sides have agreed on. However, if a student just stop going to school and for one time, and other students will keep on doing that, like one after another, and then it may cause the school to have a very low education like standard and also quality, that may make the students actually have a bad education, which is definitely not good for the students. In this case, we win this clash area. And then it is and also our opponents have failed to respond on another point, which our prime minister had told before, that about school rules. For example, a part of students go on for a protest for some kind of activity, and then days later, another group of students go on another protest, like not attending school. So school itself become a place that is kind of unnecessary, as some students go to school, some students are willing not to go on school because they want to go on protest. So it doesn't make sense. As schools themselves, they are created for education in that sense. So I believe we win this clash area because it is definitely we have expressed our opinions on education and safety for all those teenagers.
Proposition loses this debate the moment they attempt to mischaracterize the world right now, and as if you would be sentenced a death penalty and if you randomly walk out of school. So firstly, this is untrue. Who the heck would legally accuse you for not going to school. We don't even accuse the students for not going to school at the first place. And after I clarify this, I do not want to hear any random responses against this. Secondly, if we assume that the counterfactual that proposition should defend is true, violent outbreaks would have heavy stances. And lastly, a lot of school laws that exist right now are children focused, meaning that it focuses on protecting these students. And the fact that these are issues within the school that dissatisfies the students is a proof that the school is acting illegally. So 2 things in my speech. Firstly, some clarifications. Secondly, the class that breaks the deadlock in today's debate. So firstly, the clarification. The government team is framing the action of leaving as students just going out of school without asking consent to their parents or schools or etc., which isn't true because even if it is true, we still believe that it still is successful in spreading their ideas of dissatisfaction towards a society or school, and this is the flaw that team government is proposing in their own world. Then B, while team governments keep on mentioning that the action of protesting is illegal, and it is also not illegal to simply refuse to attend the school, our team doesn't understand where this kind of logic comes from, and because protesting isn't legal in the first place. And even though we be charitable and say that the protesting is actually illegal, their team is simply making an unfair debate, stating that our side is cheering legal action. And also their team's world where violence is extremely likely to happen, violence is breaking the law, leading to all those fancy harms that were mentioned by team government. Then C, we clarify again that the issue within society is relevant with the school life, because we think that school already recognized how school is supposed to be important later, because they're taught from various sources like teachers and parents about it. So if they're willing to abandon their education, if they're actually willing to make their education, we clarify again that the issue within the society is relevant with the school life, because we think that students already recognize how school is supposed to be important, because they're taught from the various sources like teachers and parents about it. So seriously, who the heck would randomly refuse to go to school that animals are dying right now? And at least the issue will be relevant with school life in our world. And I want to keep this solid, which was mentioned by our LO in the first argument. And let's actually buy their best case scenario, 2 layers under this. So firstly, students leaving the school is terrible, and their education will also be ruined in the end of the day. So even in this world, we win. And the entire reason why the law that prevents students from leaving the school for years without excuses exists is because government cares about students' well-being. However, if students' life at school itself is so terrible due to conservative culture, hate, and etc., we think that letting them to leave for a bit actually fits the purpose of the law much better. And secondly, in many schools, law allows students to leave school when there is a good excuse, and we think that we also think that students stating their opinion is a fair excuse for this. Proud to oppose. Then moving on to our team clash about what should we value more in today's debate, education or active change in school. So this debate was an extremely messy debate, and the deadlock between the importance of education and active change would be resolved in this clash. So firstly, their case about education is important for future success. However, 2 layers. Firstly, we get the point that education is actually important, but we actually is more prone to believe that since education is important, parents to schools and society would try to resolve the problem as fast as possible to stop the protest of students just refusing to go to school, right? And then since students aren't attending the schools, parents would most likely talk to the school to make changes to happen, since they want their children to go to school, and the schools would make active changes because they keep on getting calls from their parents, and the general society will get the seriousness of the issue, and because the students are basically spreading it all around by their kind of protest, encouraging change or opting in. So this is what we expect to happen, since we already know that the education is extremely crucial and is important for the students and their life, just like how government has mentioned in on all of their speeches. And secondly, even if we are charitable and say that our expectation is actually wrong, we believe that even though students go to school and are basically forced to go to school in government team's world, the education environment won't be healthy enough for the students to actually learn and pay attention and do everything that the government team expects in their world. So since students are basically forced to attend school, even though they have dissatisfaction and anger towards the school, they won't be able to listen at all or even pay attention to well participate in the class. This means that despite the fact that education is important, if students aren't able to attempt this peaceful way of protesting, they will rather choose violence or methods that are bad for their mental health, such as just keeping the dissatisfaction to their own minds without telling anyone, and which I'll also elaborate later. And secondly, their case about why their alternative about respectful dialogue is actually effective in their world, and simple means talk with the principal. However, firstly, their alternative of respectful dialogue would most likely not work in our world and also their world, because of the fact that most schools, teachers or adults would care or won't really care about the children or their issues, and we even think that their desire for change is serious, which means that the team government's alternative of respectful dialogue won't even work, at least won't be impactful in wanting change. And change happens when parents or large mass of students are involved, which cannot happen with peaceful talks. And this also means that team government's case would also would always lead to violence, because nothing is changing, or else they will have to keep the dissatisfaction to themselves compared to our world, where it is comparatively peaceful but impactful. And also our since the children are voice, not them. However, that means other students and portray anger with violence, which means that our world is comparatively better with us just refusing to attend school. And also our team assumes that violence would happen because first,
ideas floating around this debate on whether true vision of the government's world. Yet we still manage to frame the world more likely to our advantage. Why? We firstly explained that students would still have loads of incentive to go against the school, given the fact that in the proposition's world, the anger would not be expressed through the refusal. Secondly, we also explained that students are not mature enough and short thought span as opposed to adults, where they cannot enough comprehend long-term scenarios. Lastly, we also explained the impacts of these two worlds that we give you. We said that violence is in the bounds of harming other people, a comparatively much worse alternative, because it destroys all the educational benefit that government likes to talk about in this debate. And number two, we also said that suppression is also in the bounds of an issue being silenced and oppressed people not being recognized, which is just as worse. Right? And we still believe that these counterfactuals still stand in today's debate because of a simple fact that every substantive statement coming from the opposition as a government as an attempt to protect their case is futile. But going further, we also prove that even if government's counterfactual is true and the visions of the two world that we give you is not true at all, it's still so much ineffective in government's world. Firstly, we tell you on the point of urgency, right? We tell you that there aren't enough power that teenagers hold in the status quo where they can actually organize a meeting or perform a march and actually gather that much people to opt into their change. Just because few children are unhappy, we also said that this wouldn't really change a politician's wrong voting result or change the school's mind suddenly, especially when the event takes a place that is totally irrelevant from the school, which is actually the place that they're trying to make a change at. And the difference here is that the immediacy of a no-school protest conveys a school sense of urgency that opposition government wasn't able to combat at all. Secondly, on the topic of self-harm, government frames this debate extremely nuanced to their side because they make the choice of opting out of school to be something that harms the student self. Let's bring back how we already weighed this from the start of Ella's speech. We already told you that the harm of students suffering in the school that harms their identity and snatches from their well-being is so much greater than the harm of leaving school for a month. This is because with students who are suffering and distracted, they can never ever achieve full benefit of education. This was already mentioned by Elo. No engagement at all. So even in the best case scenario where students leave school, and so far the mental harm they bear is way less when they're at home, we think that this trade-off is perfectly fine in the long run, right? Lastly, Even if all of the above clashes are minimal, we win on the unique benefit of accessibility. We present this so much clearly as the DLO states. The core of this rebuttal is that core of this argument and rebuttal actually was that the school strikes are so much easier to opt in because no school strikes are so much visible to the student base. You can tangibly see that students are missing. And we also said that it's more accessible because simply choosing to not go to school is much an easier way rather than writing a whole entire essay to propose to the school principal or organizing a full event to march or whatever other alternative that proposition decides to present. And we explained that these two reasons, the reason why school strikes are so much accessible. And we also explained that accessibility is so much important benefit to pursue this debate because the easiness of opting in makes the cause appealing for students to support, which means that whatever message a school strike tries to get across will be amplified. And number two, we also explained that students are inherently powerless stakeholders in today's debate, which means that giving them the opportunity to opt in easily with an easier alternative is an extremely crucial benefit that we hold. This is why we win this debate. So proud to oppose.
So in my reply speech, I do not want to address any of the other issues that our opponents have already responded to, like some education stuff and violence. First of all, I want to clarify to our opponents, this kind of a protest is not against school issues. It is already, we have already stated clearly, it is not against the school. It is against societal issues like climate change. So these will not incorporate any type of violence. And I also want to question our opponents. They have not responded to anything about responsibility that we have talked about. Where will the students go if they want to protest, if they do not go to school? If they stay at home, then the parents want them to go to school. So then they would go and blame the school on this because this is the responsibility of the school. And if they go stay on the streets, then whose responsibility is this? Our opponents have not responded to this. This is a key issue in this debate. Who will be responsible for anything that happens to these children? If they stay at home, then the parents will try to go against the school. Then if they go on the street, then it will be the school's responsibility. So our opponents do not seem to have not responded to this fact. And also our opponents say that leaving school is their choice. It's not against the school policy. It's just marked as an absence. But it is obviously against the school policy. If you have a fever or if you have a doctor's appointment, you obviously need a school note to go back from home. So even once you step on the school campus, even if you're on the school bus, these students are the responsibility of the school. So if anything happens, and so once the parents give these students to school, once anything that happens to them is the responsibility of the school. Our parents are opponents have not responded to this. And our opponents have also been talking about how these issues are the school issues. But we have already said that if there's something wrong with school, it's not the responsibility of the students to go and go and protest. That is the parents or guardians' choices to go and protest against the school if they find there's issues. And also, so our opponents have also in their first and second speech talked about how there's a need for freedom. And this is a good chance for these students to express their voices. But we have already said no one has approved them to go onto the streets or stay at home, whatever it is, to protest these societal issues. This is against the school policy, and they have not responded to anything about the key burden in this debate. What about the safety of these students? Who will take responsibility for these students? This will get the school in trouble and also the parents, and they will get not only the students in trouble, also the schools in trouble, because this is the school's responsibility. And also, we have talked about why there is a key distinction between primary and secondary students versus college students and adults. So because these students, they are not allowed to vote, they cannot go to prison, so they are immature and they have not developed critical thinking skills mentally and physically. So they are still the responsibility of the parents at home, and they are the responsibility of the school if they are at school. So if our opponents actually support these students leaving school to go and protest, we believe that then these students should also have the right to vote, because that means that they are capable to take care of themselves. They are capable to be their own responsibility, and that now the school and the parents do not need to take any responsibility towards them. So then they should be able to vote, and they should be able to, if they commit a crime, be able to go to adult prison and have a driver's license, because these things we believe are all part of the responsibility of an adult versus a student. So, Judge, to sum up why we have overall won this debate is because our opponents have somehow tried to address our issues on education, but they seem not to understand that these issues do not incorporate violence, as they are against societal issues like climate change, I want to repeat. And also, our opponents have not responded whatsoever to the fact that that once these students stay at home or are on the streets, this is the who will take care of this responsibility. So if these students are in danger, there will be no one to take responsibility towards this. And so for all the reasons above, please give the ballot to Pro. Thank you.